Hey everyone, welcome to Garden Variety Knits. I'm Kelsey and I'm coming to you from Switzerland, where it is really quite hot today, so I have decided to film on the floor in the coolest part of the house. I don't know if anyone else likes sitting on the floor when it's hot. I just find, I don't know, maybe it's the heat rises thing, but the lower I am, the cooler I feel. So yeah, excuse the kind of casual floor chilling. If you're new here, I'm a New Zealander, but I've been living in Switzerland for a couple of years, and around that time I started knitting a lot more. I think partly because the much colder winters than in Australia, where I came here from, just was a great inspiration to kind of make sweaters and stuff. But even in this hot weather, I've been enjoying making some summer knits as well. I normally post videos that'll be just like this one, which is just some project updates, like what I've been knitting since the last video, any thoughts I have on that, and then some kind of plans and dreams and inspiration as well. So if you like those kinds of videos, then please do stick around, and yeah, feel free to subscribe if you're interested as well. Okay, so today, like I say, will just be some updates. I have one finished object and a work in progress, and then some plans that I want to talk about because I got some new yarn that arrived. There's also potentially going to be a fairly large segment about my fairly beginner sewing at the end. So stick around if that's interesting, but I will have video chapters and everything, so you don't have to watch that whole part if that doesn't interest you. So before I get into the main part of the video, I do have a couple of updates that I wanted to share just ahead of time. So the first one is that I recently knitted a little self-drafted bandeau top. I'll just insert the try-on footage I had again, and I actually had someone reach out and ask if I'd taken notes on it, and so I actually spent like a half hour just quickly writing up I think I wrote down all the steps that I could think of what I had done, and then I also I kind of tidied up the spreadsheet that I'd used to calculate my stitch counts and my increase rates and stuff like that, and I've linked that document from my Ravelry project for that top. So I might flash up a couple screenshots, but if you are pretty confident with like adapting things for gauge and stuff like that, and you are interested in knitting that, then feel absolutely free to use it, and you can just take a copy of the spreadsheet and put in your own measurements and your own gauge, and you should get something workable. So that's the first one, and the second is that the crumpet camisole, which I've been test knitting over the last couple of videos and the last month or so, has been released. So if you were looking at that and you saw, you thought it was cute and you wanted to make it, then I would highly recommend that pattern. It's just such a quick knit that uses so little yarn, because of it being basically just like a small top, like small crop top of lace. And yeah, it's just super fun, super summery. Oh, and then for that one as well, I mentioned, so both of those were covered in my last episode, which is episode 7. But as I mentioned in that, the crumpet camisole, I did modify the front neckline to be a bit higher, and I also put pretty thorough notes for that in my Ravelry project for it. So again, if you are interested in that mod, feel free to use those notes. Okay, I think that's everything for updates. Okay, so my first finished object is this little lace bandana. I just found the stitch pattern online, and I adapted it to do a triangular bandana. It's really cute. It's like little leaves, I guess. I will insert some pictures of it both before and after blocking, and hopefully some try-on footage as well. But yeah, it's just a triangle. I think I started with 3 stitches, but in my opinion, maybe the end is a bit too pointy. Maybe I should have started with like 6 or something. And I just increased 2 stitches every other row. So every right side row I increased on either end. But I did have to make myself a spreadsheet to kind of chart out the increases in the lace, because I find it's quite tricky to make sure that when you kind of have partial repeats on the ends, you don't accidentally end up increasing stitches. Or I also found sometimes it was easy to I think that basically if you kind of do 2 yarn overs at one end and then 2 decreases at the other end, it doesn't actually balance out quite well enough. It ends up a bit wonky. So yeah, I charted the whole thing. So that is linked from my Ravelry project for this if you are interested in making the same thing. Yeah, I've just shared that spreadsheet, and it's pretty simple in terms of instructions. I think that the only other thing to know is that at the end I left all of these stitches on live. So yeah, started at the point, knitted upwards, increasing, and then had all these live stitches, but started an I-cord and knit like 25 centimeters of I-cord, then did an I-cord bind off for all of those stitches that were still live, and then did another 25 centimeters of I-cord. If you've knit a bandana before, you'll probably be familiar, but yeah, pretty easy. And then personally for the edging, I just kind of left it pretty raw. I did a slip stitch selvage. So I just slipped the first stitch on every row with a slight twist. You can look it up, like Nimble Needles has a whole list of selvages that you can choose from. And on that topic, I did originally try an I-cord selvage. So I guess it's integrated I-cord, like I-cord as you go. But I think it was maybe because the lace has a fairly loose gauge, I think it's cinched in too much. So it looks, I actually did block this little bit just to see, but you can see that it's kind of too tall in the middle compared to the sides, like it's curving down. Yeah, so I abandoned this, and also before blocking it looked even worse. But yeah, you can basically choose any selvage you like. Like I've seen garter selvage on bandanas, and that looks pretty good. I think this little clean edge is good by me though. Especially, it's at a pretty loose gauge, so I used 4mm needles. It's just a cotton yarn. I think I got it at Sostren Grun or whatever, you know, like cheap cotton yarn. And then I find it a topic of endless interest, how to knit flat efficiently, and you know, when you've got entire rows of pearls. So yeah, the lace is good because like a lot of lace patterns, it doesn't have anything on the wrong side rows, so the pearl row is just plain pearls. So in this one I chose to do mirror knitting for that, which I talked about I think in like my first or second like episode on this channel. So if you want to go and see me talk about learning to knit mirror reversed, that's fun. So yeah, I didn't find that. The only thing that does is because it ends up orienting the stitches differently on your needle. Instead of slip, slip, knit, you can kind of knit two together through the back loop instantly, but then your knit two togethers, you have to slip, slip, and then actually slip, slip back to the first needle, but like in the correct orientation, and then knit two together. But I didn't find it particularly onerous. This was a very quick project. I think I did it in 2 days. It's also a good scrap buster if you've got any like non-wool, so cotton, silk, linen sitting around. Then yeah, it's 112 meters I think in this one, but you could even make it a little bit smaller, or you could use a contrast I-cord if you wanted. So yeah, if you were really playing yarn chicken, you could probably get one out of even just 100 meters. Yeah, so that's that one. I really like it. I love the color. I don't own anything red. I think that I might have to make myself like a kind of darkish rusty red sweater maybe at some point. I don't know, I quite like it. Yeah, so that's that. And then I just have one work in progress, which you have already seen, and that is my Tombo Tee. So I have this on Try It On Tubing because I just tried it on and recorded a little bit of footage. I split the sleeves like, I don't know, 5 rows ago, I think. And also you can see that I gave it a mid-project block like here, and that line is really clear in the try-on footage as well. I feel like, even though I did mention this in my last video, I had so many finished objects in that one that I didn't really cover many details about it. So I've got a couple things to say. So the first one, which is new, is just that, so I finally finished all of the yoke, which included a bunch of sleeve increases and then some raglan increases. And I know that this is just how it works when you're doing a top down in the round like sweater or top. But like, you know, this is also fingering weight. It's on 3mm needles. And I should just very quickly mention that the pattern is the Tombo Tee by Florence, but I'm knitting it without stripes and I'm going to make long sleeves. And it is the Knitting for Olive pure silk in the color Dusty Artichoke. Okay, what I was saying though is that it just, you know, that time before you split for sleeves, like honestly, since about 3 rows into the raglan increases, I felt like such a slog. It felt like I was never going to finish the raglan section. And I normally don't mind kind of, I don't know what it is, maybe it's because there's like, you are counting, you know, you're counting your increases. But I found it very hard to just switch the part of my brain off that was like really focused on the progress. And yeah, it felt like it was going to take forever. But now that I've split for the body, somehow just the fact that it's stockinette in the round, I don't need to think about it at all, it's great. It's very satisfying. One other thing I want to talk about is the neckline. So I'll probably put in the try on footage now. But I've done an I-cord around the neckline, so I applied that. I didn't know 100% what a good pickup rate would be, so I did the one where you kind of pick up a stitch and knit it into the I-cord as you go. But I don't think it's actually left the cleanest edge. So I think I'm going to have to redo it basically. Okay, I'll show you hopefully in real life now. In real life. But I don't know if you can see, there's kind of these long legs poking out of where it's been picked up before it's in the I-cord, and part of that might be that it's a 3-stitch I-cord, and maybe that's just genuinely not enough fabric to cover over the place where I'm picking up. But part of it I wonder is also if there's just a bit too much yarn in the picked up stitches. What I'm thinking I'll do is redo it as a 4-stitch I-cord. I've also heard someone mention, I think it was on the aka Nora Knits videos, she was talking about the Sailor Swift top by Kutova Kika, and she said that there's a purl stitch in the I-cord details on that, which makes it lay flatter. And since I'm really looking for kind of a very clean, minimalist look on this, I'm wondering if I should try that trick. So I don't know if that would work with a 4-stitch I-cord. In that case, I'm imagining that you have, like from the front through to the back, you have knit, knit, purl, knit. Or I don't know whether it would be better to have an even number of knit stitches, so 5 stitches, 2 knit, purl, 2 knit. Let me know if you have an opinion. I'm probably not going to redo it just yet. And then the other reason I have to redo it, even if it looks kind of okay, is that in my pickup, I was picking up 1-to-1 on the front, but I missed one, and now there's this little funny pucker where like 2 columns just slope into each other. I don't know if you'll even have been able to see that, but yeah, it's slightly frustrating. Yeah. Anyway, I am really loving this pattern so far. Like, I think the shape is so nice. I think I got a comment from Maya of Millets and Tinks on my video where I was trying to decide what pattern to use for this kind of blouse I was imagining, and she said that the contiguous shoulders on this would really give the clean rectangular shape that I wanted, and it is 100% true. Like, I can't believe how beautifully that's coming out. And I can really envisage like what it's going to look like with kind of a long plain, you know, top and sleeves. So yeah, I'm really quite excited about that. And the pattern's well written and it's extra easy if you're not doing stripes. Yeah, and I'm loving working with the pure silk as well. It's just very pleasant in the hot summer. Like it feels cooling even on my hands. Although sometimes when I have sweaty hands, it's been tricky to kind of not have it like stick to my hands. Yeah. So there are a few things I also want to say about like the techniques I'm using. So again, with my obsession with how do you do purl rows. So for this one, I didn't use the mirror knitting because I do worry that by changing the orientation of the stitches every row, it does end up with a little zigzag, which blocks out mostly, but I was worried that in the pure silk, it wouldn't block out, and the fine gauge as well. Like this one is lace and it's a looser gauge, and I don't know, I just also, it was like I'm less invested in the outcome of like a 2-day project. Plus with this one I had to purl every other row the entire project, so I kind of wanted something that felt sustainable, so the mirror knitting was good for that. But with this one, you're only knitting flat for like the very beginning shaping up until you join at the front of the neck. So I decided, in that case, my go-to for like keeping good tension on my purl is Portuguese purling. So the one where you put the yarn around your neck. I mean, there's some, I think I used the Very Pink Knits tutorial to learn this, but yeah, I would love to know as well if people who do that style do it for things like ribbing as well. Like, if anyone has tutorials for ways to do like mixed purling and knitting Portuguese style, like let me know, because at the moment I only ever use it for total purl rows, or maybe like one knit stitch, you know, at the edges. And there what I tend to do is I basically like, I keep the yarn where it is, but I do like an English style almost, just for the knit stitches. Yeah, so I find, I mean, this has been blocked, but like the tension is great. And I can't see any rowing out. I tend to look at the purl bumps for rowing out to see. Yeah, and I can't see anything. So I think that Portuguese purling I find is a really even, like a fast way to do a row of purls, but keep very even tension. I do get sick of swapping my yarn orientation if I'm knitting an entire project flat. So like I knit my very first cardigan I Portuguese purled every other row, and I just got sick of it. So that's why I like the mirror knitting if it's like I will commit to that if it's the whole project. Yeah, I don't know why. I guess also because when you have a project where you're going to swap from the flat to the knit in the round, if you have like any zigzagging or whatever, it's a lot more obvious because of the division. Whereas if the whole thing is knit flat, I can kind of cope with whatever my flat knitting looks like as long as it's consistent. So yeah, I guess that's all a long-winded way of saying I love Portuguese purling when it's only a little bit of flat knitting. And yeah, I think that if you haven't tried it out, I would recommend it. Let me know how you go. Just a little bit more of a discussion about techniques. I did just a long tail cast on for the beginning of this, and I actually took a picture at the time because I thought that it would be an interesting moment to just mention that when I learnt the long tail cast on, I think it might have been in the step-by-step sweater by Handmade by Florence. She mentioned in her long tail cast on tutorial that you can kind of hold the previous stitch with your thumb and then make sure that you space out the next one on the needle, and that's how you prevent a long tail cast on from getting too tight. And I was really concerned with this one because to me the neckline looked quite snug, and it is pretty snug. Like I wouldn't want to put this on if I was like, if I had like my hair in a claw clip, for example, which I think I have a couple times. I've tried to try this on. Yeah, so it's like a pretty small neck hole and it's got no stretch to it. So I really wanted my cast on edge to be a bit, like not be tighter than the knitting, obviously. So I did take a picture of my long tail cast on just to show you what it looks like if you kind of do try to space it evenly. And I also, just a quick note on the sizing, I'm knitting this in size 2. I think I'm on gauge after I blocked it. I also just want to mention, sometimes picking sizes can be a bit tough, but I just took some like t-shirts in my wardrobe that I knew the fit of. It didn't even have to be that it was the fit I was aiming for, and I just measured how wide they were, and I think that gives a really good idea of what the different size options will produce on you, and you can be like, oh, okay, this t-shirt's actually a bit baggy, you know, I want to, and you can like pinch it a little or whatever. So just in case you have had any problems, like, you know, choosing a size in different patterns, I think it can be really helpful rather than just go by like, you know, your own body measurements and whatever the designer suggests for ease. It can help, like really helpful to know the size of your own garments as well, like the ones that you like wearing, or the ones that you don't like wearing. And that's just like a great way of picking sizes as well. Because one thing I've seen a lot of people discuss is that there are some designers who will suggest a certain ease in the notes for the pattern, but then all the pictures will be a different amount of ease to that suggested. So like, you know, they might suggest 10 centimeters positive ease, but actually the model is wearing 30 centimeters of positive ease. So it can be good as well just to know like what you're aiming for yourself, in terms of like how garments that you already have fit on you and whether that's what you want to achieve. The very final thing I wanted to mention in terms of techniques is that I saw Lily Kate France of Lily Kate Makes post a reel about knitting color work or something. But one thing that she mentioned in it is that she tensions her yarn around her whole palm. And I, up until now, for my kind of, I don't know, it's like a bastardization of Norwegian knitting, maybe, and continental style. But I tend to tension around my pinky and then just like have my index finger. And I tend to have that quite relaxed. I don't like do the full, like, I don't know, my finger is not fully out. But yeah, in the video she tensioned it around her palm, and then, I don't know, and then I guess I can just still do that with the finger, and that seemed great because like you don't end up with any tension in the rest of your fingers. And I've been trying it out, and yeah, as I mentioned, in the super sweaty weather, I find that my palm is too sticky, so that's not great. But in like cool, dry environments, like in air conditioning, in the train, whatever, it's been really nice. So if you've been, you know, just, I'm a huge advocate of just like having a huge range of knitting methods up your sleeve, and then you can swap it up depending on the project, depending on the size of yarn, the size of needle, the like fiber content, the humidity, the heat. And so yeah, I love just adding one more thing so that if, you know, I'm ever feeling strain in my pinky, I can just change to this method. Yeah, I think that's just a really nice thing to do, is just always experiment. And one thing I will say that, you know, along those lines is that I also think, I've heard a lot of people say it's nice to have different types of projects on the go as well, so that you can give your hands like a rest from one. You know, if you're using like a non-elastic yarn in one project, then you can have a wool one as well to like just do something different. Or if you're using really chunky needles on one, have a small like sock needle project as well. And I completely advocate for that. But then in addition, if you could have like different styles of knitting. So for example, if you have one where you're like, I only ever English knit on this, and then on the other, it's like, I only ever continental knit on this one. Ideally, then you still get a chance to swap up your knitting style, but you don't end up with inconsistent tension within a single project, if that makes sense. Yeah, so just a little PSA and a little tip I thought was really neat. Okay, so that's it for project updates, and I will talk a little bit about my plans. Because I got a box. I bought yarn, and it came. And what I bought was, it's 100% linen yarn. It's light fingering, and it's from Vollen Berlin, and it's Lino Muka. And I got it in this green, and I got it in this white. And it is so thin. It says light fingering. It says 2 to 3 millimeter needles, so I thought I could get away with 3 millimeter needles, but I'm not sure. And it says when it's held single, you can get 30 stitches in 10 centimeters, which I guess, yeah, that's pretty small. And it doesn't even mention row gauge. I'm really worried that basically any fingering weight pattern that I try to use this for, it will just be so off gauge that it's going to be painful. And I'm also worried that if I use 3 millimeter needles, it'll just be really gappy and it won't ever fill in those gaps. So I'm going to do some swatching. Also, it comes in skeins, which means that I need to do my little finger winding around the neck trick to stop it getting tangled. But what I'm thinking I might do is actually wash it first to see if it plumps up any. and then obviously do some swatching. But yeah, I find as well, you know, I've been saying this the last couple of videos, my suspicion is that with linen yarn, because it is so stiff and it kind of resists coiling, I think that it tends to knit up at a slightly larger gauge than you would expect for the needle size. So I want to try washing it first and make it a bit softer and see as well if I can get a slightly smaller gauge on like 3mm needles through that method, because otherwise I'm gonna have to size needle down to like a ridiculous degree. Yeah, so I guess my options are, yeah, size down needles however much I need to get like a nice fabric, and then deal with the gauge calculations for what I want to make, and probably also require more yardage, or held at double, in which case I think it'll be like a sport weight, honestly, and then also buy more because I will need more yardage to complete my project. Anyway, that's my dilemmas, but I will swatch and get back to you. But yeah, I will quickly mention my plans. So this one, the green, I really want to make into a Melodies, anyway, a Melodies top, which is by Verpnet. And it just looks really pretty and kind of classic, and yeah, I just think that this will really suit it. And then with the white one, I've mentioned this plan before, but I really want to make one of those tie front vest style crop top type things. I'm going to do that by not even really pattern hacking, but using the Tulster pattern from the Creya Bear, because she did one in her DK version in an orange. I've been thinking about this a bit more. She used her vest style back and her camisole style front. I think I'm going to mash it up even more and do vest on the whole of the back and also the front armholes, and then just use the V-neck shaping from the camisole, and then obviously knit it flat so that it's a vest and add ties. For the ties, I'm not totally sure how to attach them. Like, one of the things about the style is that you're trying to get the front edges to just kind of lay parallel when you tie it up. And for that, to me, it feels like you almost want the ties to start very slightly into the body of the vest. Like, I feel like if they're attached straight to the I-cord on the front of the vest, inevitably the knot will cause a gap. So if anyone has any ideas there, without just telling me the details of paid for patterns, but yeah, if anyone has any suggestions just out of their own brain, let me know. And otherwise I'll just work something out, fiddle around with it until I find something I like. Yeah, and I mean, I think the Tulster gauge is pretty loose even for fingering. Maybe not super loose, but I'm really worried about whether this will work at all for that. I think I am going to have to hold it double, and I'm pretty resigned to just buying more of this. The shipping to Switzerland was pretty reasonable, honestly. And I'm pretty excited to try this because, you know, I'm on a bit of a linen kick at the moment, and I just, yeah, this had, I think, a pretty nice color range, and it just seems like a nice yarn. It has good reviews. But if I have to hold it double, then that kind of defeats, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's like a, okay, so it is 245 meters and 50 grams. And I guess if I hold it double, then it becomes 120 meters. Yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose a little, because I was looking for something that had more meterage and was a bit thinner, because I think that that's honestly a similar, if I hold this double, that's very similar to like the Antigone from Derriere and Natura, which I was trying to avoid something that was that heavy. But you know, you win some, you swim some. Okay, and I think that's everything for plans, at least that I'm planning to actually do anything about in the next couple of weeks. It is so hot, like even knitting on this, which I know will be long sleeve, like I know that I need to give myself time to finish it so that I can wear it when the weather becomes a bit cooler, but there's part of me that just wants the instant gratification of finishing summer tops and wearing them right now. So yeah, I'm finding even, this is my one whip at the moment except for some socks, so that's why it's getting any attention. But I think that's why I cast on and finished my little bandana, because I wanted that instant gratification feeling. Yeah, and maybe the Miletus top will take a bit of precedence over the silk blouse once I get started. So now is where I will be just chatting away about sewing for like probably half the video. So if you are knitting only, it was great to have you, and I will see you in the next one. But if you are interested in sewing, okay, I should preface this. In terms of my sewing experience, it's nowhere near as much as the knitting. I went on a little bit of a kick kind of tail end of the pandemic. That's when I got my sewing machine, which I was very generously given actually. So I posted on like a community Facebook group being like, hey, can I borrow a sewing machine? I need to hem some curtains. And I did, and then while I had it, I kind of did a couple of little projects. Using mostly DIYs from the Essentials Club, who is a girl called Maddie. She's Australian, and if you haven't heard of the Essentials Club and you like the idea of like clear DIY tutorials that are just mega cute, you should definitely check her out. I will link at least one of her videos because we're talking about it anyway. But yeah, and so at that time I did a bit of sewing, and I just really enjoyed, like, her approach made me feel like you can just kind of try something, you know, like you don't have to necessarily have a perfect plan. You can just try some stuff with a fabric, and more likely than not, like, I don't know, basically just the idea that it wasn't rocket science. Like, if you were putting fabric together in roughly the right configuration, it probably would look like a garment in the end. So that definitely gave me a taste of like the freedom that sewing can give you. And I brought my sewing machine with me to Switzerland, but in the time since then, I've only sewn like one project, and that was the Calvin wrap dress from True Bias. And I did a mock-up of that, and then I did the real thing. And maybe, I don't know, PDF patterns are a pain because you have to assemble them, like assemble the pattern first, which is just as much cutting as, like, it's more cutting than cutting the actual pattern. And then also that one in particular had miles of bias tape that I had to make from my fabric, and like I found as well that like pressing bias tape was really fiddly and applying it was quite fiddly. And I liked the result, but it feels like I'll put in a little video, but it feels really very plain, which I know is partly the fabric that I chose. Like, I really like it. I wore it to a wedding, and I enjoyed just wearing something that I'd made. But I think I just, I don't know, like that project maybe was a little underwhelming in the end for me. So it didn't like kind of, and I think also I was just getting more and more obsessed with knitting at the time, because this was like a year and a half ago. So maybe that was also just like, it didn't have a chance. But anyway, I have picked up a bit more sewing recently, and so I have made a pair of pants, and they are I'll just put in a picture. They are the Ethel pants by Style Arc, and I love them quite a lot already. I haven't worn them out of the house yet. They need a wash. I only just kind of finished them and finished pressing them. They need a wash, and they need some hand mending / touching up in a couple of places. But it was just so much fun making these. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's because they're pants, and that somehow feels more like cool and powerful than a dress or a skirt. I'm really not quite sure. Anyway, I had this old duvet cover, and it had started wearing through. I'm very worried about this because obviously I cut out the bits that had worn through, but I think that this fabric is nearing the end of its life in general. Like, one of the places I need to fix is a place where it's already torn. This is on the inside, luckily, and it's at the bottom of the waistband. But I guess I just tugged on it at some point, and the fabric has ripped. So yeah, these may be an exercise in just mending more and more as they get older and deteriorate. And also, like, again, on the inside of the waistband, but you can kind of see here that it's like just the fabric has worn through. And that, like, I knew that when I was cutting the fabric pieces, and I intentionally put that on the inside, but I can just imagine it happening in more and more places. But on the flip side, they're not super heavy. So I'm hoping that they kind of, now that it's not in duvet cover format, where it's like got the weight of the whole duvet as well, and you're kind of tossing and turning, like it's easy for it to like to put strain on it. I think that maybe in pants that, you know, they don't have to hold up so much weight. I'm really hoping the seams will hold up better. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to start doing full sewing like analyses here the same way I do with my knitting projects, but I do want to mention that I did French seams on everything except for the crotch seam. So for the crotch seam, I just overlocked, and you can see it's kind of quite messy actually, because I don't have a serger, so it wasn't like cutting it cleanly. What I do have is an overlocking foot. So this did not come with my machine. I bought it after seeing a tip on YouTube about how you can overlock on a standard sewing machine. Something I didn't really know. And you can kind of just check your machine for like the right stitch pattern. It's the one that looks like a zigzag, but it's got running stitch next to it as well. And if you add an overlocking foot and you kind of, basically there's a rail here that you like line up with the edge of your fabric, and then there's like a bar that the zigzag stitches I think go over the top of, and then it kind of, it's, you know, the bar has an opening at the back so that the stitches can run off the top of it, and that lets the zigzag like actually enclose the edge of the fabric. That's my understanding. And yeah, so that's really useful, but it's also really slow because it's doing like zigzag and then back and forth, and it's like, it's just a really slow stitch. And I used that for all of the seams in my Calvin wrap dress, and it was just painful, and also it doesn't look the nicest. I was a bit scared with the curve of the crotch hem to try doing French seams, but for everything else on this project, I opted for that because I think it's cleaner, and I just wanted to learn how to do them as well. So that's, yeah, the crotch seam. But for the French seams, first of all, this has inseam pockets, and I wanted to know how to do French seams with the inseam pocket, and I found the most incredible tutorial, which I will link below. And I just followed that to the letter to do the side, like outside seams first. And then I did just normal French seams on the inside, like leg seam. And then I did the crotch curve. Yeah, and that was all pretty easy. And yeah, I guess the only other thing I wanted to show are two things. So the first thing, I know this is a ridiculous thing to show, but I wanted to show the way that the seams line up at the crotch. I know that showing the crotch of pants on camera is maybe not like the most glamorous thing, but it's just perfect. I was so pleased with how everything lined up. And also at the back of the waistband, I lined up the seam of the waistband with the seam of the pants pretty perfectly as well, if I do say so myself. This was also my first time doing like a stitch in the ditch closure for the waistband, and I messed it up so badly the first time because I only caught like the back fabric like 30% of the time. I kind of turned it over and it was just like I'd missed with the seam like so many times. I just hadn't pinned it far down enough, and I probably didn't press it either effectively. So I had to undo that. And in undoing it, because it was kind of too close in to unpick easily on the outside, for a little while I was trying to unpick it from the inside, which was really dumb because there was already another seam that was keeping the outside of the waistband onto the pants, and it was really easy to mistake them from the inside. And so I accidentally cut some stitches for the outside casing, like waistband attachment, and then I lost where I'd cut those stitches and didn't repair it before I went and redid my stitch in the ditch. So I'm gonna just hand sew that, probably even just like top stitch it with like by hand so that it isn't a hole. And yeah, I will also fix that rip at the back, and then just fingers crossed that this will not disintegrate like in the first few months of wear. And then the final thing I want to mention is that I did buttonholes, and like in my Calvin wrap dress I had also done buttonholes for the wrap tie to go through. Sorry, I want to mention before that since I said these are the Ethel pants, but I didn't mention that I followed the sew along, aside from the inseam pockets, I followed the sew along by Emily Lightly, and then there was another one that I will also link below that I used for some of it too, although I think I just watched that all the way through to get an overview. But Emily Lightly has a bunch of, like a couple mods that she made to the shape of the kind of bottom curve of the pants and adding this drawstring. I think that's the main one. And so I made those mods as well. She also lengthened them, but she's taller than I am, so I just skipped that. And yeah, anyway, that was a really great sew along, so it definitely gave me the confidence I needed to make these. Anyway, I had made buttonholes before, but I had done them. Basically, I didn't know how my machine worked. I'd found the buttonhole setting because it looks like a buttonhole. But when I'd experimented with it on scrap fabric, all it seemed to do was make like a really tight zigzag. So I was like, oh, I have to, like, it's a pretty old machine. It's like 20 years old. I kind of was like, maybe I need to like manually turn the corners and like make a square. So that's what I've done previous buttonholes, and it ended up so messy, obviously. And then I discovered my buttonhole foot, because thanks YouTube, I just like, I don't know, I was watching sewing tutorial content and there was maybe I did look up buttonhole just to try and work out, like, on my assumption that I had to do a rectangle, just see if there were any demonstrations of anyone doing that kind, because all the buttonhole tutorials I'd seen were like fancy new machines that had like a 4-step buttonhole function. And I saw this YouTube short, which just like, I didn't even watch it, I just saw in the screenshot like, you know, a foot that looks like this. And I was like, oh, because I'd just been rifling through kind of the accessories that came with my machine. And I was like, is that what that is? So then I intentionally looked up a few more tutorials. And the important moment came when someone who had a very similar machine to me demonstrated pulling down the buttonhole lever and flicking it back. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I was able to work out the rest just by playing with scrap fabric. But yeah, if you have a secondhand machine and it's old and you're not sure how it does, like if it does buttonholes, it might have a hidden lever that like lets it actually size the buttonhole in conjunction with this foot. And even if you've lost the foot, you can probably buy a new one. So it's the lever that's the most important, and the buttonhole stitch setting. So then I was able to do like actually good buttonholes. I'll put in a picture as well of them before I like inserted the ties. Yeah, so I feel like I learned a lot. I learned stitch in the ditch. I learned French seams. I learned French seams with inseam pockets. And I learned buttonholes. But what I didn't learn, so for the most part, I've been pretty good about like pressing my seams as I go. All the things that make a really tidy finishing, you know, like pinning correctly, like, you know, like when you're attaching a waistband, pin the most important points first and then do the intermediate pins type thing, and same with the crotch curve. That's how I got my beautiful intersection. But I didn't press my crotch seam before I attached the waistband, because I was like, oh, it's just one seam, I'll do it later. Because it was just overlocked, not a French seam, I was like, oh, there's nothing complicated there. But as I was just pressing that seam, getting these ready for their first wash, I realized that I had like sewed the crotch seam in opposite directions on each side of the waistband, basically. So there's no way to press it perfectly, which is fine, just an easy rookie mistake. But yeah, that's, I guess, another reason that you press every seam before you do the next step. Unless you're being lazy, which I almost always will be. Anyway, that's my pair of pants. And then I have like a billion sewing plans. I mean, these are made of striped linen, which means that they both look like pajama pants and also a little bit like prisoner pants, but I don't mind. I really do love the idea of making matching sets, but I don't think that I can actually pull off a matching set in stripes. I've still got a bunch of fabric left over though, so I am gonna make some tops and maybe even a dress. The top that I'm thinking, so there's one that, yeah, the Essentials Club has this cute like summer crops tutorial video where she does 4 in one video, so like good bang for buck, and I think I'll just do the plain one from that. And then I also have this top that I'm wearing, which I bought from a brand called Magpie Goose in Australia. It's really cool because they partner with Indigenous artists and they use their art as like screen prints, and it is Indigenous owned and stuff as well. Anyway, I really love their fabrics, and I also really love the styles of clothes that they produce with the fabrics as well. And so this one, it looks pretty plain, just kind of a high neck top at the front, and then it's got this like open back with these little buttons. So I was thinking I might just dupe this. So in this linen, like, I can't remember what this fabric is. It might be linen too, but it's just very stiff. And I mean, it might kind of soften a bit over time. It hasn't in the last couple of years. But obviously this duvet linen is very soft. Oh, I forgot to mention, this duvet cover I bought in Japan from Muji, which is a store that I am very drawn to. It's got very kind of plain, minimalist designs and clothes as well. But yeah, like their bed sheets always just made me so happy. Like the colors and the, yeah, like patterns and fabrics. And so it's very, like, that's why I'm actually very happy to be making it into something new. Yeah, but I think with the drape of that fabric, this will look completely different, but I still think it might look quite cute. So I'm thinking, yeah, of making a dupe of this as well. And then there's also, I've been watching, I've forgotten her name, but I will link below. There's this woman who had like 2 years in a row, like everything I made in a year, and it's just all so cute. And like her sense of style is amazing, and even her kind of beginner projects are all wonderful. So I definitely have been inspired by some of what she made, and in particular I've bought a pattern that's called the Olivia Top by Slow Morning Studio, and I'll put like a picture on screen. And it's in particular got this really cute open back with like ties on the top and the bottom. And so I have the leftover tencel fabric from my Calvin wrap dress, and I'm thinking that I might make it into this top, and then if I have enough left over, I might even make a matching skirt so that I can wear it together as like almost a dress, and then also have the separates so that it's not just like one quite formal feeling dress. Anyway, that's kind of the plan. We'll see. On the one hand, I don't know if the fabric is like my absolute favorite, so I don't feel particularly worried about just using it up on something that's kind of half-baked. And on the other hand, I think that it would look quite nice in this pattern, to the top specifically, and so yeah, I'm pretty happy to also try that out. So I think that's my sewing plans. They're all quite ambitious. I will be updating here and also on Instagram if you want to follow along with any of the kind of sewing parts of this as well. And if you have any particularly good beginner tips, there was another beginner tip video that I just watched recently that I will also link because it's fantastic. So if you are getting into sewing and you're looking at all the things that just make it better and both kind of a more relaxing experience because it can get quite hectic, but also, you know, that give you a better result, then yeah, I would highly recommend that video as well. So yeah, I think I'm trying to learn, you know, all those nice skills that just give you confidence and, you know, don't kind of waste your work. So, you know, things like pressing as you go. I find it so tedious, but, you know, you just kind of have to relax and let the process be the process. And it is much more relaxing than just like constantly having everything turn out wonky and yeah, like having to unpick stuff. So yeah, if you have any tips as well of like resources or even just your best sewing beginner tip, let me know, put them down below. Yeah. And I'm really sorry if this is too much sewing content for you, but I do think there's significant overlap in the kind of craft communities. And I'm seeing more and more sewing in other knitting videos as well, like, you know, Marlene's making podcast or whatever is probably the best example. Yeah, so I think it's probably fine. And I can do what I want. That's the other thing. And you can skip it if you don't want to watch it, obviously. I guess the real thing I'm concerned about is that people who are interested in sewing will already be sewing at a much higher level than me, and that's not interesting. Or you'll just be starting and then this will sound like gibberish. So finding someone who is interested in the level of sewing that I'm doing maybe is a little bit harder, but I'll improve, I promise. Yeah, okay, I think that's all I have in terms of my making. The teeniest little life update is just that I am easing back into work now, which is an interesting change after quite a lot of time off. But I still have a couple days off each week and I'm still doing like tons of like lake swimming, and the weather here has just like gotten much hotter and much more summery. So yeah, it's pretty wonderful. I can kind of swim most days if I want to. And yeah, the sewing, which is maybe not the most summery activity because I'm kind of by a hot iron for half of it, and then my sewing machine also gets very hot. And then also I get a little stressed sometimes and that adds to the heat. But you know, that's all right. I can always go and have a dip in the lake afterwards, which I think is a great way to just cleanse yourself of any burden, really. My boyfriend and I went on a couple of quite gorgeous walks. I'll put in a little bit of footage maybe at the end, which again, hot day, sweaty walk, but then lake swimming. Perfect organization, I think. And then one more exciting thing is that my sister, who's been living in New Zealand for the last, you know, many years, I mean, I'm the one who left, she didn't, but she's going to be moving over to Scotland soon, and so I'm going to see her probably before the end of the summer. No exact date, but she's definitely arriving in the continent, and that's quite exciting. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to spending some more time with her when she's here as well. That's everything for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please give it a little like, and if you're not subscribed but you made it this far, maybe consider it. And yeah, feel free to comment with any thoughts, questions,